Hello and welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis, and as always, I'm your host. This is going to be kind of a short one, so let's just jump right on into it. Alright, there's not that much going on this week other than what seems to be hefty allegations being made by Ray Fisher, better known as Cyborg from Justice League, against Joss Whedon for abusive and unprofessional conduct and behavior on the set of Justice League, as well as producers Jeff Johns and John Berg for what seems to be an enabling attitude toward it. I have no cause to disbelieve Fisher here. I'm just shocked that this is the first time we've been hearing of an actor speak out against Joss Whedon. I figured it would have happened sooner. I think we all remember, or at least I hope we all remember, that Whedon's ex-wife already aired out that disgustingly self-apologetic letter that he wrote her, where he basically admits to running a casting couch atmosphere on his projects. To quote, he felt like Zeus, if you need something to remind you about how vile that letter was. It's a shame that this happened to Fisher and to anyone working on Justice League, and while any conduct that could fall under abusive is never deserved by anyone, hope that it is at least the least dangerous and traumatic possible, and not the worst case scenario that many people are already speculating. As for Johns and Berg, they better have damn good people on tap, because even if Whedon is the main focus here, people are going to want to know how and when they knew about this and what exactly they did, because this is something that is definitely not okay and people are going to be gunning for them. And if it turns out to be something that they could have stopped, then hopefully they suffer repercussions and consequences for that too. Stay safe, Fisher, because already John Berg has a statement saying that it's only because he is unhappy about the comedic atmosphere of Whedon's Justice League and that he didn't want to say quippy catchphrases like booyah. Despite the fact that Fisher has said booyah multiple times and has kind of owned that line, he's owned being Cyborg, and that is completely ludicrous that would be part of the reason why he is speaking out against this, especially given that the Snyder Cut is being released, so there would be no point in any of that. And that's pretty much about it. Well, there was a bit of fun with some really bad Marvel promotional material that made it sound like a character was busting a nut. Didn't help that the font of the promo was white and gooey looking too. But to wrap this up, I do have to bring up the unfortunate passing of Joe Sinnott, inker extraordinaire, who has long been heralded as not only one of the finest Big Two inkers, but maybe one of the finest ever. A big piece of his claim to fame is that he is regarded as a premier Jack Kirby inker, a title well earned given how divisive that area can be. And going through his body of work with Kirby, it's not hard to see why. Bold, decisive, and strong decisions from two competent creatives. It makes both come out looking good. It's a shame that this is maybe the third week in a row where I've had to do an obituary on here, but as always, I'm just happy to say that the outpouring of love and remembrances have been uncountable. Rest in peace, Mr. Sinnott. You will be missed and remembered. Moving ahead to what I read this week, first off, we have All America Comics #1. This is Joe Casey's long-awaited Real America Chavez series that he announced like 3 years ago, or whenever that borderline racist Marvel ongoing was announced. To which I thought, alright, maybe it won't be as bad. And it isn't. It's just kind of bad in very safe and less overtly offensive ways. Honestly, the major thing about it is that it's weighed down by Casey desperately trying to do a pastiche to Marvel. It feels reductive, desperate, and kind of pathetic. I know he wants to keep as much of his original pitch and plot behind the character as possible, but it's really hard to care about the character as her own thing when everything he does just calls attention to the fact that she's not. Even the text bubbles, depicted here as Instagram captions, are labeled The Real America, which is awkward and blunt and distracting, as is seeing her throw a barbed, snarky comment at not Thor or not Captain America. This should try to stand on its own 2 feet, and it's a shame that even in the years it's been in development, that's all Casey could think to even do. And well, the other thing that holds it back is that the Spanish sucks, like it's on the level of early 2000s Google Translate. Stilted, blocky, blunt, with grammar that's all over the place. I know it's a bit much to expect from Casey in particular, but after the Latinx writer ended up writing racist stuff anyway, I was hoping that this would be a little bit better in terms of representation. There are some good things though, mostly that this America is a bit more grounded and relatable, a bit more tough and realistic. She feels like a person, and that's kind of what I want for representation, to have these people feel like people and not caricatures. Is that enough to keep this series afloat? No, not really. And it already feels like Casey is going to dip back into his wannabe mind-bending tones that ruin and mar his other works. Not as bad as Marvel's, but it's definitely not worth checking out unless you like pastiches. There's even a page that parodies and pays tribute to the old DC Who's Who's guidebooks. It's lame, it really is. Overall, 2 thumbs middle. Next up, we have The Boys, Dear Becky number 2. This was a step in the right direction, considering how unnecessarily ugly and pandering the first issue was. But just to get it out there, it feels like a very going through the motions affair. Very paint by numbers and too rigid. It doesn't feel like Ennis is indulging in his writing preferences as much as he is using them as a safety net. There are scenes right out of Dick's and even the original The Boys in this issue. But they're lacking the spirit that made you know that Ennis cared at least about writing them. That's not to say that the issue is cold and without heart, but it's the difference between a rom-com that has decent writing but leads that have no chemistry, or one that has average writing but a lot of chemistry. Sometimes that kind of energy goes a long way, and this is definitely the former, and it's wafting around. I do enjoy the slight hints that Wee Huey is on the verge of ruining his comfortable and sedentary life because he can't curb the compulsion or the need to revisit his past and Butcher, but that's only really the slim framing device so far. This was a step in the right direction, but wherever that direction is heading, it's going to be a very boring journey unless it amps up the emotion and the pathos. Overall, 2 thumbs middle. I can't even think of anything else to say. There's a bunch of nothing that happens in this issue. It's all very rote set pieces that we've seen tons of times before. And that's not interesting, it's not engaging, and it's a bit disappointing and lackluster. And finally, we have Billionaire Island number 2, which ironically feels more like an Ennis comic than The Boys does right now. Something about the incredibly fervent and stewing hatred and anger that Russell is imbuing in these pages is wonderful, and something that is almost a hallmark of Ennis's crueler works, right down to the righteous and jaded military man protagonist. It would almost be an homage if it wasn't also just entirely up Russell's alley. The satire is scathing, emotionally ripped, and kinda humorously rendered. The good balance between how funny and slapsticky it's trying to be, it's almost cartoony, and the harder and tougher impact it's trying to leave on the reader. I think that's what's getting me. That's what's feeling reminiscent. It makes for a very thrilling and engaging read. I am so glad it's finally back after that quarantine hiatus. We're 2 issues in, and if it keeps this up, it might be one of Russell's best works in ages. But I should also mention Steve Pugh, who is supremely clever and ingenious with his artwork in this. One set piece in particular is just fantastic and just felt so fresh and original. Overall, 2 thumbs up. The issue is still setting the stage for the story, but at this point, I'm already really invested. Anyway, let's move on to what I watched this week. We have 2 things. We not only have another episode of Stargirl, but also the premiere episodes of Doom Patrol. Let's head off with Stargirl episode 6 first. Shiv Part 1. This was a huge upgrade from last week's episode. While that felt like a JSA series that was spinning its wheels, this episode felt like a Stars and Stripes show that could have been, and excelled at it. What I mean by that is that Stars and Stripes, the comic that the show is mostly based on, was a very focused, if small-scale ongoing. And that's kinda what this episode basically was. It puts such a great lens on not only Shiv and the Dragon King and their dynamics, interactions with the setting and the characters, but it makes me wonder why there even is a JSA or an ISA in this show. Dragon King is instantly more entertaining and dramatic than the Injustice Society, and has a better route to the plot than the others. It really feels a shame that he's been more or less a cameo and afterthought before this episode, since it reminds me of that great cold open of the comic where we see random students get abducted and turn into his hooded minions, and how great seeding that out earlier would have made the reveal of his lair in this episode. It says a lot that these two and their relationships feel a lot more at home in this series, for the tone and the themes right now, than anything else does. They just fit right in. That's not to say that the episode isn't without its flaws. The conflict between Courtney and the JSA is still great and doesn't feel earned, but rather just conflict for the sake of filler, but that's minimal. Other highlights include Mike again being more and more rounded out and becoming a sympathetic character, as he feels spurned and ignored by his father in favor of Courtney. The actor does a great job of conveying that hurt and resentment. And lastly, even though I haven't mentioned him in previous episodes because he's come off as such a goofy and bland foreshadowing, we finally get to see The Shining Knight in action this week, and it is wonderful. Him charging in was perfect. It makes me so excited to see where this goes in part 2, and to see what else the series is setting up to and including if they're going to be touching on Pat's past with the 7 Soldiers of Victory, and all that entails. Overall, 2 thumbs up. Still has some flaws, but it's definitely one of the better episodes of the series. And lastly, let's move on to Doom Patrol Season 2 with Fun Size Patrol, Time Patrol, and Pain Patrol. So we finally had the second season, and the show is back in form and might be better than ever. It feels more settled, more confident, and with writing and performances that feel more comfortable in their skin. The first season was all about finding the right tones and right grooves. But with this new season, it feels more honed, the characters are solidified and identifiable, and thus readier than ever for development, introspection, and arcs. These episodes waste no time in showcasing just how far the series is willing to take the cast and how much punishment they can take both externally and internally. There is some very wrought, emotionally and mentally heavy scenes here, and they go all out for it. Robot Man was maybe the biggest and most consistently engaging character in the last season, but these 3 new episodes give equal and equally effective spotlight to Crazy Jane, Negative Man, and even Cyborg. Where they are and where they're going become thrilling, intense arcs that pull the watcher back into the world seamlessly into being invested. These episodes themselves are fun and delightful, although some of the conceits can fall by the wayside to the reflective aspects, feeling less substantial and less important, which isn't bad, but it does lead to less of that manic energy that permeated season 1. There's a cohesiveness to the writing now, less madcap and more structured, but the enthusiasm, chemistry, and intensity remains. These 3 episodes are a great start to what is maybe the best DC show in years, and I can't wait for more, because I have no doubt that there is going to be more on the horizon that is worthy of these, because this sets a high bar. Overall, 6 thumbs up. And that's it for this week. As always, I want to say thank you to everyone out there who's ever sent a question, comment, or topic of the show. And I'm just so grateful in general for everything. And if anyone has their own question, comment, or topic, you can always find me on Twitter at THE_SNICKMAN. And I'll give a shout out to the cover artist for the show at DOTEMCEE. Please check them out. They're amazing. Give them all the support you can. And well, that's it for this week. I just want to say have a great weekend. Have a great 4th of July. And see you again next time.